Thank you, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the second International Legal and Policy Conference on the future of transport, fall or rise of the transport sector. In today's session, the topic will be technology and transport challenges ahead. Today, as our panelists, we have Mr. Satya Chakravarti from IIT Madras, Mr. James Jordan from HFW, Mr. Sandesh Jadhav from Saint Gobain, and Mr. Bhaskar Rangayan from Siddhan Intelligence Private Limited. This session will be moderated by Mr. Sagar Singham Setti from the Aerospace and Aviation Lawyers Association of India. I now invite Sagar sir to commence the session.
Thank you, Atmaja. Thank you. So welcome again to all the panelists and welcome to all the participants who have been around for quite a long time, for almost 2 days now. Some of them, I think these are all the last leg winners, let's say, but as I said, it's recorded, so probably all your thoughts and insights and ideas are going to be shared around in the web world. I mean, we are used to quite a lot these days with the virtual side of things, so there'll be more content in the web world. So welcome again, and thank you for being part of the conference and more specifically on this panel, transport and technology and the challenges ahead. So as I mentioned, we have been having this discussion for 2 days on a number of topics, starting from space to aviation to urban transport and how to make our supply chain in general more resilient, which includes all modes of transport. One of the cross-cutting themes that we have come across is technology. So every panel somehow or at some level reflected on the fact that technology is an enabler. So I'm glad that we are doing this session, a separate session, to understand what it really means. Also, how what technologies are currently available, because everyone says there is a technology. Our technology is an enabler, but I think we need to little bit dive deeper into some specific examples and also maybe some specific technologies as such, and how they are actually adding value to the overall needs, or at least meeting the customer needs. The second point that we have also come across is also the fact that technology, of course, is marching forward, but that's a fact. It's not today, it's not something new. It has been there for probably decades, where technology always there's innovation, there's new technologies in place, but the fact is also that law and policy do not catch up as fast as we would or as we could expect. So it was also reflected by some of the panelists in the last 2 days, whether it's the space sector or in the airline sector, or in the urban transport sector in general, irrespective of the mode, actually, even in shipping, ocean freight, all of them, and also in logistics, they were all saying, oh, by the way, it's great to have all these technologies, but then we don't have the right policy framework, or we do not have at times the vision, because everything that we're doing is in a very uncoordinated manner, or kind of inconsistent with what is happening in at certain level, and then it's not the same in another spectrum. So I hope this panel brings back or pulls back some of those points, and then let's see how we can address, or probably we'll see if there are more specific points to address. So given the fact that Satya sir is already here, I'm just checking. Yes, he's here. Welcome, Satya sir. I was just doing a brief intro, but I hope you already caught up with me as well. So I leave the floor to you. So the way we'll do is we'll have each of the panelists speaking for 7 minutes. Each of you come from a different background. So even if there's an overlap, that's fine, but at least you each of you have a perspective to share. So please go ahead, and then we will come back in the second half with some specific questions based on your interventions.
Okay. Thank you, Sagar and beloved panelists for joining us. It's a great opportunity for me to be with you. And of course, I will try to get into the space as quick as possible. Though it is only 7 minutes, there is a lot that we can talk about technology and technology related challenges. Of course, in the past, we used to call the automation as we enter data and consume data. Then in the previous decade, we used to scan the data and consume the data. Today, what we are doing is we are sensing the data, consuming the data. There is a lot of evaluation the technology has brought in and making our life very, very comfortable and easy. I'm going to cover a few things. Okay, what is the current trend and what are all the priority issues? There are some sectoral challenges I see. I'm sure in the last 1.5 days, you all must have experienced a greater amount of technology related conversation today, because without technology, you can't run a business today. It has gone to that level. Okay. It is not no more a term called enabling your business. To survive today, you need technology. Okay. Most of the business today now built on top of technologies. To that extent, things have moved. Okay. There are, of course, this technology brings a lot of advantages. Of course, obviously, we are not going to talk about that because the panelists are definitely aware of what we are talking about. And there are some infrastructure, how much of human privilege that we left to the human, all this we will try to discuss here. I will take some area, like not take all the areas. You all must have observed the way the IoT deployments are happening, Internet of Things. Okay, you all must be familiar with IoT. IoT is any device which is able to connect with the internet, start transmitting data to the specific unit so that the data is consumed and the services extended back. Okay. Today, literally everything is monitored. Okay. Whether people or the goods or any moving objects, particularly we are talking about transportation, so obviously I have to bring moving objects. These all getting tracked. Okay, that's all happened mainly because of the IoT devices are getting deployed in millions on month basis across the globe. Okay, most of them are really aware of or not. I'm talking about the common man. So there are a lot of IoT deployments are happening. Okay, you wear a smartwatch, then you are out. That's it. You are in the IoT world. Okay, you keep your mobile, you are in the IoT world. You move your vehicle, a new vehicle, you are in the IoT world. So petabytes of data is getting added on day-to-day basis in every country. Okay, today the transportation is well managed, or at least started getting managed very well by the robocops. I'm not talking about the physical robots. I'm talking about the systems. Okay, which efficiently guides the traffic authorities where how you can divert the traffics. Okay, there are a lot of sensing data getting sensed and viewed to take effective decision immediately. This all is possible mainly because of not only cameras but also by IoT devices. Okay, and of course now tier 2 and tier 3, those days we used to think, in a village or small towns the security is not that great. It is not the case today. Today you just send a drone, it takes care of the security assessment, it takes care of views and channelizes, sends all the information to the central authority to take a call. Okay, so drones are coming very heavily. Okay, so net what is happening is there is a huge amount of data is getting collected, tracked, and getting analyzed. Okay, through the machines, by the machines, for the benefit of the human. So to that extent, the IoT is changing the way the transportation sector is actually operating. Okay, of course, now the world is now moved to the app-based solutions, systems, mobile-based activities, transaction. It's all in your hand now today. Okay, so it's also created a lot of unimaginable, unstructured data coming from various sources. Okay, at the same time, Now, whatever the data we are collecting from various sources conveys some set of message. It arrives some set of pattern. Are we ready for that? If you ask me, yes, we are reacting to that because abundance of data is coming inside. Take traffic, take the number of masala dosa or biryanis are creating a lot of traffic jam today because everything is placed using your app. So you will not know, right? In the past, you asked some 10 years back, will masala dosa can create a traffic jam? Nobody would have believed. Today, it is not that. You see the Swiggy and the Zomatos, they are more members are driving the vehicle and taking for a delivery. Okay. Sir, of course, the point is actually things are completely changed, but there's so much of data is coming in, coming out, going out. How vital the data, which is coming from multiple sources, though it helps the government and the private institutions to decide, frame the policies and pictures, how the smart cities can basically exponentially grow. But how much of data that we are using that we have to really see. Okay, I'm not doubting. Of course, we have enough data to take a calculative and better scientific decision. That's what I mean. And at the same time, you take the IoT, there are multiple frameworks and the protocols are followed in IoT today. Okay, that increases a bit of risk factors, but always, in the enterprise world that we can always overcome. I will not say this is a showstopper at all. No, it is not. But at the same time, there are the technical members will understand the kind of, various protocols and frameworks are used in the IoT world that gives some set of risk. Okay. So at the same time, the funny part is, yes, still many of them doesn't know what is getting tracked, though we use extensively all the information data. Okay. I'll tell you some sectoral challenges. Okay. In the past, the people used to claim huge numbers. No, I transported around 50 million passengers, 30 million passengers, 40 million. Every airlines was making big statement. When you counted, that number was not tallied with the total number assumed by the governments. That's where the e-ticketing concept has come. Though every ticket booked for the airlines started getting tracked. Okay, at least the numbers. But IATA now basically recommended to go for a e-airway bill. They wanted to achieve the e-airway bill status by 2020, but still they have to achieve. There is a long way to go. Mainly because the e-airway bill also brings a lot of transparency to the cargo shipments are happening from one country to other country. The number of transactions are happening. This all is slowly picking up speed. Okay, so e-airway bill is one area I really see the cargo industry need to focus the way passenger industry has done. And there are a lot of e-commerce traffic spikes, which was not anticipated 10 years back. Now it has come that we need to basically take care. And there are a lot of last mile connectivity. In the past, major cities, they allow the cargo shipments in the night time. Today, there are a lot is happening in the day as well. It is creating a lot of challenge for the traffic authorities. Okay, now they need to streamline how those last mile connectivity by the e-commerce companies are going to be addressed. That is another thing. Shipping is still not done. It has to go a long way. Okay, whereas the air and the surface phenomenally grown up. Okay, with the help of the taxi automation and the way the hospital industry is responding to the client needs. These technology areas are really gone up and helping the transportation. But I still see there is one single solution is missing. Is everybody talks about the smart cities, but they say, what is smart city? You ask, many of them say just enabling internet. No, it is not. There is a lot comes as part of smart cities. I'm sure the other panel must have discussed. Let me not get into those details. But however, we don't see a single solution where the sea surface and air is well connected and well simulated to have the better passenger experience, travel experience for the transportation industry. That's what it means. Okay, and of course we have to still do a lot in the tier 3 and tier 4 cities because these are all untapped. Okay, at the same time, the kind of infrastructure deployed by the technology world for the benefit of users, travelers, is abundance. Today, you can even track every street on within your city, so that you can choose the way that you wanted to travel. That's the best thing that we are seeing. Okay, today you wanted to go to some set of malls with your family. You wanted to go to some eateries. You don't go to specific app. You start consulting the mapping solutions like Google Maps, and you check which are all the eateries are around and what is the traffic associated. So you start, instead of using those infrastructure or apps and the technology, you are now started consulting with those solutions. That's a welcome change. Okay, now most of them have started investing heavily on the smart city solutions, and this is also coming up, though it is currently, as of today, it's all in silos. Okay, and of course, in the past, the infrastructure, particularly on the server side, it was a big challenge, but the cloud made the complete sweeping change in the industry. So obviously, it is easy to basically go in an infinite mode instead of going for a limited mode and talking about constraints with respect to the server technologies. Okay. And of course, now today, traffic violations are getting sensed by high-end cameras, and they issue the tickets for the defaulters or the violators. I'm not sorry, it's not defaulters, violators. Okay, there are a lot of surveillance systems kept. Now I'm surprised, city like Chennai and all, literally every street is almost covered with cameras. Okay, so there is a lot is happening at the same time. But please remember, all informations are going to your common server. Or if there is a cloud burst, okay, if there is a shutdown, then your city will have a lot of challenge. Okay, the way, if there is a power plant is shut down, that entire area will go for dark, right? The same way, the technology will make or fill you. Okay, and that, of course, I wanted to conclude this very important topic with raising some of the concern related to the technology, how it is overusing the data, or the way that we are supposed to use the data has to have a very strong review by the mechanism. It's not only the government but also by the private organization, because there are a lot of data we are collecting from various sources. Okay, the abundance of data sits like a data lakes almost in every nook and corner within the technology area. So in the connected world, how much of data that you are expected to consume, and how you are expected to not misusing the privileges of the human. That one thing that you need to really take care. I know it's a law firm like you guys are better to talk about the human privileges, but this one thing is going uncontrollable. This one area everyone should focus. This is my view, of course. Okay, because I see more than government, the technology companies are having lots of data of the public. Today, this is where we are. Let me conclude. I can take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhaskar sir. So no, I think we'll come back to the questions, but I'm glad that you already raised the topic of data, or that data being the new oil, as they say, and of course comes with it a number of other obligations and responsibilities. So we'll come back. Maybe Sandesh or James will also address more from a legal or from a policy standpoint as to how this kind of data which is being collected unstructured, and of course in the hands of both government as well as private entities, and at the end of the day, if there's a data breach, which you have seen in airline industry, you have seen it in the other modes of transport as well, where there were breach both at a government level as well as in the private sector as well. So all this data is getting into the wrong hands. But apart from that, the point that I have when it comes to data is data sharing, access to data is also some legal issues around it. And this is not just what we call in Europe GDPR. So it's not about individual or personal data that it boils down to, but also there is data where you have B2B, so business to business data. So you're sharing data between private entities, but then at the end of the day, that data is also being is shared to a third party with whom you have no connection. So you were saying also, you mentioned, what is getting tracked, or what is the data being used for. So you actually don't have answers for those things, but legally also we're still somewhere trying to figure it out. But we'll stop there. I think that's a good point. So we'll move on to Satya sir now, who's also going to elaborate more on some specific technologies and in the transportation sector, and probably we'll hear from him. So Satya sir, over to you. Shiva or Tariq, if you can please. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think Tariq was, yeah. Can you just
Yeah.
go to the first and go to presentation mode? Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Very well, sir. Yeah, carry on.
Good. Yeah, so I just thought that I will actually talk about 4 ways of disrupting future mobility that we are working on, and throw open the questions on how that's going to impact regulations, which is what I thought will be an important point to discuss here. Next slide. So I just want to start with where we are. So we are located at this 5-story building called the National Center for Combustion Research and Development at IIT Madras, which is the world's largest combustion R&D center in academia. But it is also turning out to be the center of most number of deepest tech startups anywhere globally, to the extent I know. Because we have been developing flying taxis, mini rocket launch vehicles, micro gas turbines, crude oil from waste, multi-sensor satellites, and hydrogen, as well as been supporting the Avishkar Hyperloop, of which there is going to be a startup very soon as well. Can you just click once? Yeah, of these, I'm going to actually make sure that we speak only about 4 things, and I'll try to connect these and present a picture of what is in store for the future, just to sort of fire up our imagination. So this is to say, we are actually doing these things. It's not as if it's just an imagination, and these are in different stages of development, and we can actually see them come to fruition in the next 2 to 3 years. Next slide. Yeah, let's start with E-plane, where we are actually making the most compact electric VTOL. VTOL stands for vertical takeoff and landing plane for urban aerial mobility. And the vision here is to actually travel anywhere in 10 minutes within cities, which saves up to about 3 years of lifetime for city dwellers who would otherwise be stuck in traffic on a daily basis. And our goal is to actually offer on-demand affordable service that most people can use. So we believe that air taxis will actually do to cities what lifts or elevators did to buildings in allowing them to grow vertically. We think that air taxis will actually allow for cities to grow laterally. So what we are specifically looking at is the possibility of making high mileage flying taxis for door-to-door travel in cities. So the operative word is high mileage as well as door-to-door, which is what is going to make it very affordable and very accessible. Next slide. So in this, okay, before we go to the next slide, I think I just want to show just go back to the previous. Yeah, I just want to show the picture that we have actually rendered over here, where we are essentially showing a bunch of different rooftops where you could have landing sites for these aircraft, which essentially means that you can hail these planes to come up to your rooftop, and you can just go up to your rooftop, get into these planes and go. There are several renderings of these things that we have made to showcase this. You can go to the website that we have where you can see a lot of these things. Didn't want to spend too much of your time. Next slide. The other thing that we are actually doing is working on Hyperloop, where right now we have what's called the Team Avishkar Hyperloop at IIT Madras, which has actually developed a pod which can go with contactless propulsion and contactless braking. They're working on the levitation part. Pretty soon they've got the most scalable pod award this last summer. We've also actually developed a prototype of a small tube where we have developed the vacuum to very, very low levels, lower than what we really need. In 2019, we have the pedigree of actually being the only Asian team to have taken the pod to the SpaceX Hyperloop pod competition. So there is a picture with Elon Musk out there. We have a future plan where in the next 6 months, we want to have a 500-meter long, 2-meter diameter tube, vacuum tube, where we can run pods under more realistic conditions. In phase 2, we will actually go to full scale of 4-meter a diameter and a 10-kilometer stretch where we can achieve peak speeds that are more close to reality, like about 600 kilometers per hour. The first phase will actually take us to about 250 kilometers per hour for a small pod, like the one that you see with in the picture with the students. But the full scale will actually be more like a mini bus with about 40 seats or so, is what I imagine. In the long run, over the later part of this decade, you can expect to have these kinds of commercial hyperloop corridors that are running from, let's say, Chennai to Bangalore, or any of these kinds of pairs of cities. Next slide. So with these two, what we have, we can imagine. So right now, I just did a Google search for Google Maps, a picture of Chennai to Bangalore by air, and that actually shows you about 1 hour. But you have to actually look at where the starting and ending points are. The starting point is exactly not in Chennai, and the ending point is definitely not in Bangalore, right? So you have to keep that in mind. But what we are talking about is a door-to-door from Chennai to Bangalore in 40 minutes. So how would that work? You take an air taxi from your residence in Chennai to the Chennai Hyperloop station in the middle of the city, and that would be about 10 minutes. You take a Hyperloop pod that keeps coming at you every 2.5 minutes to take from Chennai to Bangalore. This is an on-demand long-distance transportation, and that would take you about 20 minutes to go to Bangalore. And then again, you take an air taxi from the Bangalore Hyperloop station in the middle of the city to your actual destination, Bangalore, in another 10 minutes. So this is how you're actually going to go from place A to place B across cities. So I call the Hyperloop the intercity metro. And on top of it, if you have the air taxis, you essentially are also going from your metro station to your home. Next slide. Talk a slightly different topic, but still within the realm of mobility. But this is going to be in the realm of cargo mobility and not people. So we have this startup company called Aerospace that makes the most fuel agnostic micro gas turbine based hybrid electric vehicles, which are more suited for long distance heavy duty trucks, where we can actually use this micro gas turbine to power a very slim battery pack and have a electric vehicle powertrain in the front end. And this essentially is at 1/10 of the payload, and it is actually fuel agnostic, that you can use several different fuels like diesel or CNG or hydrogen. And the cost is about 1/10 of a conventional turbine, and refueling is in minutes. In fact, you will have multiple fuel tanks in a truck, and the driver simply has to switch a knob or hit a switch for changing the fuel with no other additional complications. So keep this in your mind, and then let's go to the next slide. So the other one that we're working on is what's the company called X2 Fuels and Energy, where we are producing waste to fuel the economy. What are we trying to do? We essentially take unsegregated municipal solid waste, and we've developed a process called hydrothermal liquefaction, in which we now put this unsegregated municipal solid waste and get crude oil out of it. And we have essentially a roadmap for going all the way from whatever we have done to going all the way to about 140,000 X, right? So that is where you will actually get about 3.5 tons per day. That's what we are currently targeting to do. In fact, we are skipping the middle one called 1000X. And then, of course, the requirement really is all the way going to about 1,000 tons per day for many typical metropolises. So we are still, in a logarithmic scale, we are still halfway. We are hitting the halfway mark. We still have to do like a 10 and 100 and 1,000. So 3 more steps to go. But fundamentally, we will essentially get crude oil out of the waste that we generate. Now what happens? Let's just look at the next slide. So imagine, let's actually take the X2 fuels crude from the unsegregated municipal solid waste, centrifuge the sludge out, and you will get what's called a clear oil called kerosene. I'm just skipping to the next bullet. But in between, the sludge alone actually can be mixed with the petroleum sludge to make different grades of biodegradable plastics. That means you can actually get plastics to degrade in 6 months or 3 months or 1 year, whenever, whatever you want. So that's a revolution in itself. But on the other hand, we have the clear oil called kerosene, which in turn contains the components petrol, diesel, kerosene, etc. Now, don't go to the refinery at all with this, right? Take the kerosene as it is and directly use it in the Aerospace engine to run a hybrid electric heavy duty long distance truck. right? So essentially it means that you locally produce and consume the fuel in a distributed manner across the country. So now I want you to, which means that you get rid of all of the petroleum imports, long pipelines, long big oil tankers, huge power production, long distance transmission, all of those, and refineries, and distribution of petrol and diesel and kerosene separately in tankers, and petrol pumps which have all these different things. Everything is gone, right? You can just make this and then just use it right there, right? So this is essentially the vision here. So next slide. I'm going to ask questions here, right? So what we have figured is almost all high societal impact technology development has regulatory implications. If you do not have regulatory implications, very likely you're probably not doing much, something of very great impact, because otherwise politicians don't have any job, right? So they have to come in only if there is a societal impact. So that's one of those metrics. So air taxis will have safety standards to meet and operational regulations to follow, right? Across how are you actually flying across over city skies. Now, here's the catch. Today, air taxis are actually being viewed as conventional planes, and that makes air taxi development hugely expensive. Is there a way to actually look at this as in between automobiles and aeroplanes? That's what we want to essentially position this as. That will just completely disrupt the space and bring down the costs and the developmental times and efforts and so on. But of course, without any compromise on the safety standards. The third point is about Hyperloop safety and operational standards. These are even yet to evolve. We don't even know what standards we need to actually have. And this is clearly an infrastructure item. So in a country like India, where the railways is run by the government, I don't even know why they should, but that's another point to debate. That's for they can partially privatize perhaps, but will Hyperloop actually be run by the government, or will it be private, right? These are questions that we have to ask. As far as the fuels are concerned, we will actually start making and supplying fuels in local markets. Is it okay? Because fuel supply is hugely regulated and the prices are still regulated. That's a huge point of contest among politicians, right? So are we kind of throwing them out of the picture completely? And what are the standards for developing fuel agnostic hybrid electric trucks? The point essentially is we are now fast making huge amounts of technology with governments and regulators, all of these people far behind what's going on, right? So how are you going to catch up? That's where I want to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think you just brought back to me my memory of Star Trek. You know, years and years ago, when I'm a big Star Trek fan, and when all those were flying, I used to wonder how these things can happen. But engineers like yourself do make things happen, and I'm glad to see in live some real action taking place, not just some paperwork like James or myself or Sandesh sitting in some corner of a building and trying to pull through some paperwork. So no disrespect, guys, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I think on flying taxis, probably James will pick it up to address, you know, why some of the rules are still considered to be, or at least why is it part of the aviation sector rather than not. But that's an ongoing topic that is being addressed, not just in India, but globally as well. In terms of Hyperloop, as you mentioned, it's an infrastructure issue, but also it is a point where issues like model shift, because at the end of the day, politicians have a vested interest, or at least, you know, they'll try to policy moves as and when the interests move. So Hyperloop would be a big disruption if we have to, and if it happens, because that's going to move or take away a lot of traffic from air travel, from your rail sector. So we have to see how that's going to work out. But then that, of course, needs specific infrastructure requirements and needs. Your point about crude oil, or the fuel agnostic, you know, being fuel agnostic, I think is for the road sector, this is what they've been struggling, at least on the long distances. So for the trucks and the buses, you know, they do not have an alternative. But on the other hand, all the sustainability related goals that whether it's at a COP26 or whether it is the Paris Accord, or whichever you pick up, everyone has 2035, or the EU, for instance, the European Union has 2035, 2040 as their goals to have zero emission targets. But it's impossible to reach that. That's not the reality. The reality is that whatever solutions that are available are only for light duty vehicles. And all these vehicles are predominantly going around cities or urban landscape. So when you talk from let's say Bangalore to Chennai, or any, like Amsterdam to Paris, which is still okay. I mean, Amsterdam to Paris is also doable because it's 3-4 hours. So probably battery electric vehicles can manage it. But the point is, you do not have a hydrogen-based, a vehicle. So I think we need to be agnostic. Otherwise, it'll be quite difficult even for innovation or to take place in the first place. And this is where I think policymakers should also understand, at least that's my point here, is also that we need to be agnostic in order for innovations to take place or new technologies to come into place, and for the market to thrive. Because currently what is happening is everyone is running behind electric battery based, but then in few years time we would probably come back to the same point where we are today, because there is still the question of infrastructure unavailability. There is still probably the congestion issues will still continue, which we see currently in the urban landscape or otherwise. So great points. I think let's see if Sandesh and James, followed by James, will address some of the legal or regulatory issues as well, and then we'll come back again. Thank you, sir. So Sandesh, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sagar. Thanks a lot for collating all the points. Can you please enable my screen share so that I can share my PPT? Well, thank you. Thanks a lot, Sagar, for inviting me and making me a part of this panel. So, transport and technology challenges here. So, there are few challenges which I'm going to just make a what you call enabled or going to touch upon that these are the challenges which I would like to share or which I would like to speak about. So, let's start with the driverless cars. So, the background of this is in 2019, at the 74th session of the UN General Assembly, that in 2021, this year particularly, we are at the end of 2021, but this year has been declared as the International Year for Circular Economy for Sustainable Development. Now, when we talk about the circular economy, like as we all know, how to reuse the energies, how to renewable energies sources has to be reused again and again, and to make them part of the economy. So, the road transportation, I'm going to talk about the driverless cars, the laws associated for the self-driving cars, the need of the interdisciplinary laws, and the economics of intellectual property licensing, which is involved in this. Then again, IPR law or the copyright law, this law comes in picture. And one of the major challenges, one of the major threat which I'm going to talk or which I'm going to touch upon is the cyber security and data privacy aspects of it. So the automated vehicle and transportation goes into a trio of technology, the infrastructure associated with it, and the travel behavior. So, as we all know, the estimated potential economic impact you have seen, as you can see on the screen, what are the technologies or the industrial revolutions which made the huge impact on the human lives? So, the socio-economical as well as socio-economical, these are the technologies which changed the entire economics, not of any particular industry or particular being a particular human being or particular industrialist, but it's like whole world has got revolutionized using this particular technologies. Mobile internet is still stand first. This is by the way a very old data in which the next generation genomics has been shown at the sixth number, but as we all know, in this post COVID-19 or in the era of COVID-19, and now new Omicron is also coming, the genomics is uh, topping the list. As we know, out of Fortune 500 company, top 50 companies are uh, who are working in a pharma, who are working on the antivirus. First, there might be some conspiracy theories like if you don't have virus, then how can you sell the antivirus? Or in the field of IT, if your operating system, imagine in the Bill Gates would have sold Windows 98 without any need of patch, and the 1 billion Microsoft Windows copies would have been got sold in 2004 itself. Now in 2022, Bill Gates wouldn't have left with any business to do. So that's the reason you create need and then you patch it with the help of antivirus, with the help of software patches. You make it as a part of continuously revenue generating model. So in the similar way, this autonomous and near autonomous vehicles or the self-driving vehicles is going to revolutionize the entire industry. And the point which has made it going to continuously need the patching, the software patching. If you see the current Pfizer and Moderna, these kind of industries which are making vaccines, these are not purely pharma vaccines. These are mRNA vaccines, and hence the people or the industries or the corporate houses which has invested heavily in this Pfizer and Moderna are not the pharma industries but the IT industries, IT giant. The similar way, our automobile industry is going to get run by the IT giants, and how it is going to. So these are the few points which they made for the laymen that driverless cars or the electric vehicle cars, and they are going to make with the optimization of traffic flow management. Like traffic is going to flow in a very optimized way. It's going to reduce the fuel cons and CO2 emission. The demographic changes, the vision zero, the potential it's going to be a potential for the more driver supports by the awareness of human driving errors. They want to bring in 6 sigma or 7 sigma in driving to avoid the accidents. So increasing traffic density is another issue which they want to challenge. But at the end of the day, just to summarize everything, this is the industry. I mean, these are the points for the layman. For the industrialized, the point is all the IT companies, Google, Tesla, and Apple. None of these are the automobile industry. Like these are the cars, or these are the companies which are making the pioneer in driverless cars. So, what are the laws associated with it? When we use the driverless cars, and the laws, or what are the challenges we are going to get? So, say for instance, now the Waymo has started collecting all the data. The Waymo or the Google has started clicking the pictures of entire roads, and while clicking pictures, they are connecting all the images, and the images are getting processed across the border. See, for instance, this is the example. This is a Waymo car, which you can see at the right hand side corner. And what are they doing? They are capturing the all 360-degree views of the streets, and while clicking those pictures of the streets, they are also clicking the pictures of the human beings or the pedestrians associated with it. Now, if you can see one family picture, and this image is going to get processed cross border. Now, companies like Waymo, Google, Apple, they are giving all the processing jobs to the countries like Philippines, India, China. Now, when this kind of image is getting processed, and now in a world of data privacy, these are called as the data subjects. Now, when data subjects can sue any Indian company who is processing this image. Now, this can go as a part of huge project, while the companies like TCS or Infosys, they're getting first time of contract when they process these images for the driverless car. But there is a law associated with it. If I click image and if I'm using this image for surveillance, then the US law doesn't resist me from doing that. When I'm roaming on the public property or on the roads, so government is using the surveillance cameras, the CCTV cameras, or in our Indian roads also by the RTO for the traffic. Police are using the CCTV cameras to put up a challan, as Bhaskar sir was stating, for the voiders or the people who are violating such traffic rules. So for that, I can click their pictures. But when such data goes cross-border for processing, for not for any public authority or not for the state, but this Google as a private company is possessing my data. What if this kid is getting grown up and he want to sue that how can they put up my family picture publicly when they are using the self-driving car? So for that, it's not only the IPR, intellectual property right, or the copyright, but also the data privacy right comes in the picture. So there is a law, as I said at the start of this my conversation, that interdisciplinary law should be there. It's not like we are going to pass one data protection bill or the data privacy bill or the cyber security bill. We need to associate that bill with the Motor Vehicle Act, with the road transportation, with the intellectual property rights, with the copyrights law. So this is one thought I want to put up. So the Microsoft president has reiterated whatever the George Orwell has stated in 1984, that it could come to reality in 2024, that if we don't enact the laws or regulations that will protect the public in the future, we are going to find this technology racing ahead, and it's going to be a very difficult to catch up. Now, this is a small representation of the smart city. What these companies like Apple and Google are trying to do, they are going to correlate the distance between the two vehicles also via satellite or via the IoT. Bhaskar sir has already spoke about the IoT. Now, the IoT is going to imbibed in each and every engine, in each and every car. In fact, it's not going to be the future. I'm talking about the present condition, where the cars like BMW, Ferrari, their engines are already come up with more than thousands IoT per engine or per car. They sense your data continually for the better performance of the engine. But having said that, these people are not only capturing the IoT data of your temperature or humidity, but they are also capturing the data. Who is the person who is traveling on my car? Who is the person who is buying the car? Or who is the person who is selling the car? So again, in the transportation, this is the one more challenge of cybersecurity, which I've stated earlier. Now, this famous case of British Airways, where the theft of the customer data has been happened from the website. Now, the news which they have given in publicly, that the data has been theft by their third-party supplier, but actually that is not the case. Now, this aircraft has been run by the British Airways, but it has been bought up by British Airways from the OEM like Boeing. Now, Boeing is having the engines of GE or P&W. Now, these engines are coming up with more than 5,000 or 10,000 IoT sensors per engine. Now, who are the person? Now, airports are no longer are the just one hop stations for getting in or getting out of the aircraft, but they are more than 1 million footsteps are falling on the airport, and kind of business analytics they are generating. Like if I'm the service provider, if I'm the airport service provider, I'm running companies like Adani or the GMR who is giving the airport, and I'm also giving that space to companies like Louis Vuitton or the Gucci, then I should know my prospective customers. So to know my prospective customers, someone should tell me the data that who is my prospective customer. So I should know my prospective customer is the person who is walking in the business class lounge. So that business class launch data or his whereabouts, I should know. And I should know that this my prospective customer is traveling on the Mumbai airport and he's going to catch a flight of 4:30 p.m. and I'm going to catch hold of him to give him some offer. The business analytics is the big game changer. When the Google Chrome has come up, Google Chrome hasn't come up only with a browser. It has come up with the business analytics. It has come up with the AdSense. This product has been developed by the Sundar Pichai, and that's the reason Sundar Pichai is the CEO. And you should know all this history, and you should connect the dots how this industry is leading towards. As I've already mentioned, the aircraft has started coming up more than 5,000 sensors per engine, just to in the name of sustainability development or to reduce the carbon emission. But these are all the companies who are capturing data continuously. The new leader, Apple, like I have given you example of the Sundar Pichai, the new leader, Kevin Lynch, who was a leader for the making Apple Watch. He is now made the leader for making this driverless car. Now, of course, you would have understand he is not going to only make this car as a sellable product, but he want to capture the data. Capture the data is the new oil, as we all say. He want to capture the data and he want to sit on this data. He want to ride on this data. He doesn't want to. Apple doesn't want to sell only the automobile cars. So now you would have connected the dots. Why all this IT company has started becoming in the business of transportation, of the business of making driverless car. So they want to sit on the data. So with the interest of the time, I want to conclude this whatever I have to say with two more pointers, that the intellectual property rights which is going to which Apple was doing, they are also making the big network with their intellectual property of lightning charging platform, which they will be using for this driverless electric vehicles. Now, these charging points, they have made the patented, but with the help of voluntary licensing, this has to be, there is a very big threat and very big challenge, because recently the Cinder Electric, the electric charging point for the cars, it has got hacked. So there is a cyber threat, cyber security challenges. So when you make a law for electric vehicles, you are not going to make only law for the data. You are going to make the law for the charging stations as well. It's going to be the responsibility of the state as well as this car manufacturer how to make this charging stations vulnerable free. So with this, there is a big presentation which I have done, making each model taking into picture of Tesla, Apple, or but in the interest of time, I'm just concluding session here, and I would like to run through these slides in for any next question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandesh. Thank you, and probably we'll anyway collect all the presentations and we'll share it as well with the audience. So no problem, or at least we'll put it somewhere so that it is used for reference. Thank you again for your insight. I think you kind of nailed the point on about data and the abuse or the exploitation of data, if I have to stretch it further, and what it could have, or what impact it could have actually. And also you highlighted the fact that companies, that the fact that they have access to this kind of data, what could be done. Not per se Google or Apple would breach, but the fact that, again, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that data is flowing from one hand to another hand, we do not know what or where at which juncture data breach could happen. And one last point, which I find it interesting but also good message for all of us, is the interdisciplinary approach. I think we are not only talking about the fact that all modes of transport should be working together and should not be working in silos. That's what when we talk about seamless transportation, using all modes or the multimodality. But here it's not just about the transportation modes. It's about the fact that laws also should be adapted in such a way that there is more consistency and clarity and certainty for the user, but also for the businesses as well. Because otherwise, why would you? Someone like Satya sir is developing all these technologies and all, and if the legal there's no clarity and certainty for them, then there's no funding available. As simple as that. So I think that interdisciplinary or that approach, which brings in that consistency, is equally important. So thank you for that. So we have our last speaker, James. Over to you. I know we kept you waiting, but I hope it was interesting enough to hear from the others as well. And maybe you can give a non-Indian approach as well to see how things are working in the other parts of the world.
Thank you, Sankar. If I could just take over the screen so I can share my slides. Great. I think you can see my screen now. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Well, thank you, Sagar, and thank you to the rest of the esteemed panelists for sharing their thoughts and views. It's great to be back at this conference. I met some of you nearly 2 years ago now in Hyderabad when I traveled to Nalsar University. It's a shame that we can't be there in person again, but I'm pleased to join this digital session and to contribute with my small section today. To give you some information about my background, I'm primarily an aviation lawyer, but I advise a range of different entities, large corporates, airlines, airports in India and abroad. And I also work with smaller entities and startups and some venture capitalist funds who are investing into the aviation industry. I deal with regulators on a very regular basis. So what I'm hoping to share with you today is trying to get into the mindset of the regulator, what a good regulator can do, and how lawyers interact with the regulators on behalf of their clients. I know many of the individuals joining the presentation and the session today will be from a legal background, and you will find yourselves on both sides of the fence. Lawyers often go into regulatory and public policy arenas and areas, and also you'll find yourself advising clients in relation to some of these issues that they have with regulators. It's a very interesting time to be involved in the transportation industry at the moment. As I mentioned, I'm primarily involved with the aviation sector, but I like to try and take a holistic approach to transportation because if you, as Sagar just mentioned, if you look at it in isolated, separate modes, it doesn't really work. We need to look at connecting aviation with the other transportation sectors. And so it's interesting to hear from the other speakers what they're doing and some of the technology that they're implementing in that regard. We're at a stage now where we're looking at both revolutionary and evolutionary technologies. Revolutionary technologies is in brand new technologies which are new to the sector, new to the industry. Drones, we talked a lot about at the last conference 2 years ago. We spent a lot of time talking about drones and urban air mobility. This year, we've seen manned space tourism and urban air mobility, taxis. There's a lot of investment going into that area, not just in India, but globally as well. Very exciting areas, but it's also worth considering the evolutionary technology, the technology which is being built onto existing forms. Biofuel, the technology around how that's going to work in the aviation sector. There's also the use of new technology to enhance the passenger experience, which is particularly relevant in the context of COVID. And also electrification, which is a big area that a lot of my clients are looking at the moment and a huge amount of investment is going into. So what are the different reasons for developing new technology? A lot of the speakers have already talked about this. There's two ways that the regulations interact with technology. They can be the reason for the technology to be created, but there's also the regulatory environment which needs to be enhanced after the technology has been created. If we look at the first one of those, as many of you will be aware, environmental laws are being implemented globally. We also have CORSIA, which I'm sure has been discussed in some of the previous sessions, relating to the aviation industry cutting its carbon emissions by 2035 and seeking to have a net reduction by 2050. The only way you can do that, but continue to grow the sector, is by implementing new technology in terms of fuel efficiency, engine efficiency, and aircraft design and type. But the driver behind the new technology here is actually the implementation of regulations and environmental laws, which is causing a huge amount of investment into technology which can enable airlines to meet those international regulatory requirements around carbon emissions. Another reason we see technological leaps forward is when there's a huge societal need. COVID-19 has created that, and I'll take a look at some of the issues that COVID-19 has created in the transportation and air transportation sector in my next slide. And finally, we have the kind of groundbreaking technology, the true disruptors, which includes things like the Hyperloop, technology that we're not sure, before we see it, we're not sure that we need it, but when we see it, we know that there's a need for it. It's very exciting, and it really does have the potential to change the face of transportation. However, unless there's a regulatory environment which facilitates the development of that technology, that some of those types of technologies may never get off the ground. And I really hope that actually regulators will look at these things and realize the societal benefits and create an environment which facilitates growth. However, my experience, depending on the country that I'm working in, is that regulators take different approaches. Some regulators look at what the rules are now, and if it doesn't fit those rules, they'll say no. Other regulators try to adopt an agile approach and try to work with industry and work with companies to build out the regulations so that it's a partnership between industry and government, lawmakers, and companies to develop those regulations. Hopefully that's the model countries like India follow it in the future. So just as a little case study, COVID-19 has really accelerated technological adoption and adaptation within the passenger experience. What we're seeing is increased adoption of biometrics to verify passenger identity, self-service and automation, basically removing the person and the human contact out of the passenger experience. And that's for very obvious reasons due to the contagious nature of COVID-19. Technology is being used to identify COVID-19 symptoms with a view to, in a year or two's time, that technology will be part of the check-in process. Hopefully, we will no longer be going for PCR tests a couple of days before we have to fly or before we have to travel to check for COVID-19 symptoms. There will be technology which is implemented which can do that for us through the check-in process or even at home. And then technology to maintain safe, sterile and clean cabin environments. But what are the legal and regulatory issues that these create? We've talked about data, and obviously that's data and privacy laws are the area where there is the biggest risk of breach. GDPR fines can be very significant, up to 20 million, or a significant percentage of your global revenue, whichever is higher. I think it's 5% currently, but that can change. And while there's a rush to implement this new technology, many companies often fail to recognize or analyze the legal risks and pitfalls. They need to ensure that they have robust data protection policies in place to deal with the types of data which is being generated. And obviously the data which is being collected as a result of COVID-19 is very sensitive. It's biometrics, which can be either fingerprints, retinal scans, or other types of very personal identification data, and also sensitive health data. Both these types of data sometimes do entail specific regulatory rules, attract specific regulatory rules because of their sensitive nature. So while companies are implementing this new technology and rushing to adapt to deal with the challenges COVID-19 creates, they do need to make sure that they have analyzed what the laws are and ensuring that they comply with the regulatory environment. Within the aviation community, you will find sympathetic regulators when it comes to implementing new technology to deal with COVID-19. My experience dealing with the regulator in Singapore is that they are perceptive to assisting airlines where possible to implement this new technology. I haven't had any direct communications with the DGCA in India on these types of issues, but let's hope that kind of mindset can be applied globally to enable aviation and other forms of transportation to restart. I'm not going to talk for too much longer because I'm looking forward to discussing some of these issues with the other panelists. But I think it's worth kind of exploring and considering on a holistic and global level, what are some of the barriers to adoption of technology from a regulatory perspective. What we see from regulators is two approaches. They can either take a case-by-case approach, where they will look at different types of technology and assess it on a case-by-case basis. If we look at the example of urban air mobility, we see in the United States that the Federal Aviation Authority, they actually take a case-by-case approach to certification of new types of aircraft. If we contrast that to what's happening in Europe, the EASA have actually created a special condition for small category vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So they're trying to create a written protocol for certification of this new type of technology. There's merits to both approaches. Flexibility from a case-by-case approach, which means different manufacturers, different developers can approach with the new technology and seek regulatory approval. However, when you're at the outset as a technology company trying to build a product, if you don't have any guidelines as to how your product is going to be certified by the regulator, that can make developing your technology very, very challenging. The regulators need to be mindful of both approaches. They need to be flexible, but they also now need to start looking at what the new technologies are and putting in place regulatory and certification requirements for that technology to give the industry some clarity. And if there's any regulators on the session or watching a recording of this session, do look at some of the technologies that that the previous speakers have spoken about, and think about whether the regulatory environment that you oversee actually has regulations and certification requirements which will facilitate the growth and development of that technology. Some of the panelists have already spoke about public acceptance. That is a big challenge, but the way that regulators can enhance public acceptance is by working with industry to create a safe regulatory environment where the traveling public feels confident and feels that the technology is actually being put through its paces, tested, and is properly overseen by the regulator before the public are allowed to use it. If the regulator fails in this regard and the technology is allowed to go to market before it's been had the proper safety checks, the proper certification being put in place, and then there is an accident or an incident which results in death or serious injury, that will undermine public acceptance, and that will in turn undermine the technology. So the regulators and the companies need to work together to create an environment that provides confidence to the traveling public. And I think that's really important, that the companies and technology doesn't see the regulator as the enemy, but sees them as a partner that they can work with to create effective and useful laws which facilitate regulatory development and enable technology to move forwards. There's a lot of different types of technologies I could discuss today, but I've only got 7 minutes. But hopefully some of the issues I've raised, some of the issues that need to be looked at on the regulatory front, show the challenges which are ahead. But if the regulator works together with technology and with industry and with lawyers acting for those clients, then hopefully we can get to a place where the technology is allowed to take off and grow, but does so safely, and clarity is provided to all who work in the industry as to what is needed for the future. I'm going to hand back over to Sagar and the rest of the panelists now, but I look forward to answering questions that anyone may have.
No, thank you, James. I think you kind of concluded as well the fact that stakeholders, whether it's the regulator, whether it's the companies, whether it's the individuals as well, because at the end of the day, it's the user, it's the consumer who should be part and parcel of all these discussions, because all these technologies are being developed or investments are going into it because there is a user, there's some demand, and then there's a user behind it. So I think your point about the fact that the technology companies, the transportation companies, the regulators, and the users, I think, should be talking to each other, and which is currently still not the case. I'm not saying it's not entirely not the case, because it has, from the time that I've seen in the last 14, 15 years that I'm associated with the transportation sector, things have changed. It's not the same anymore. So I think that's one big takeaway, and very important takeaway, that the discussion should continue, and hopefully, of course, well supported by lawyers and policymakers. So that's for sure. It cannot happen otherwise. But also the other point you made about is also the implementation and the enforcement. You could have the best of technologies, you could have the best of policy, and you could have the best of legal legislation. Sorry. But if we fail to enforce them, or if we fail to implement them in the right way, then again, it's a failure of the whole system. So I think that's what we also already see in a number of, even when we talk about safety issues, even whether it's road transport or air transport, the simple fact is that a number of these laws are not implemented in the right way, is not, but they're well written, so it's also and when it comes to new technologies, the approach, of course, I agree, and probably most of you on the panel as well agree, that it's not that bad to go by case basis. I know it's always good to take that holistic view, even though it is on a case by case basis, but at least the case by case basis would allow the flexibility, and probably if put into a holistic view will only work out in the end. So I think a number of data points here for as takeaways. I think a lot is covered already. As I said, panel is rich with knowledge and experience. But I probably will have one or two questions. I think the first question I would ask is to Professor Satya is about the financing, because at the end of the day, all these innovations, because you cannot just innovate, or you cannot just sit in that building and then come up with ideas and then say, hey, I have an idea. I think somebody should be providing that funding. So how do you see that, sir? Because I know that you are also supporting a lot of startups. So access to funding, is that a challenge still, or when you have a great idea, automatically you see the money?
No, that's not. It's still a challenge. It's a real huge challenge. But we have had some very pleasant surprises after a lot of efforts. I can give you a couple of examples. With Agnikul Cosmos, which was making launch vehicles when we wanted to actually go out and get funding back in 2018, as well as we also raised another round in 2019, if I remember. Both those rounds actually happened without a very clear law from India that we can launch private rockets out of Indian soil. And that was actually a huge surprise to me. I think I probably credit it to the storytelling abilities of my co-founder, who is a CEO. But I think a lot of people actually look for good stories. I think Elon Musk has been sort of spearheading this. America has kind of cleared these things, so everybody expects to jump on the bandwagon. So that has been hugely helpful in getting the money. But the moment Indian government actually came around and clearly spelled out that, yes, we are going to allow for private launches to happen, I think the funding has been a lot more forthcoming. So clearly the regulations has a huge impact. On the other hand, the E-plane company, we started out actually saying, let's actually make long distance drones with wings instead of these quadcopter drones, so that we can do deliveries and also do multiple short hops in a single charge, so that it becomes a lot more efficient or energy efficient, and so therefore cost effective. And we actually did this in 2019, and we found that the regulatory environment was simply not there anywhere in the world. Forget about in India, right? So so this is actually the important thing. Even if one country does a good job, right, it actually helps the rest of the world. None of the countries was actually allowing for these long distance drones at all, right? Or any drones for that matter. There were like lots of mixed bag about these drones. Now, so what we did was we said, well, in fact, we had a very good insight from this gentleman called Peter Shannon, who actually is on Radius Capital. Many of you might know him. So he actually came up with this nice piece of wisdom to me that said, change is all about continuity. So that means you have to change with continuity. And what exists today, as far as aviation is concerned, is particularly VTOL aviation is concerned, as helicopters. And helicopters are allowed to fly over most cities, except for the noise that they make. But it's legally possible, right? You have a particular ATC protocol of getting flight authorizations and all of that stuff, and then you can do this. So he basically said, if you're doing drones, that's actually something new. You're kind of like jumping from what exists to what doesn't exist. Whereas if you actually make human carrying planes, which are a lot more cheaper because it's electric, and then you're also making like winged versions of it that can go longer distances and much safer and all of that, and use existing regulations for its operations, right? Then you will actually get money, and that's exactly what happened, right? So we had to actually stick to existing regulations and say, we will make planes, the initial, what do you call it? The implementation of the urban aerial mobility will be with just about 10 to 20 planes that can serve about 500 trips to 1,000 trips, because each trip is going to be taking only about 10 to 20 minutes. So each plane can actually do about up to 50 trips when compared to a taxi that will do only about 10 trips or so, 5 to 10 trips. So there is a huge amount of capacity utilization for a plane, and therefore you don't need as many planes as the number of road taxis. And therefore about 10 to 20 planes can easily do the job with existing regulations that cater to helicopters. And that's when investors start actually opening their purse strings.
Thank you, sir. Bhaskar sir, would you have anything else to add, because you're an entrepreneur yourself? So is there anything, or probably you have enough money where you just start putting it whenever someone like Satya sir comes up with an idea, or you have probably some reason to invest, of course.
Money is always.
You're on.
Yeah, in fact, thanks to James, there is one slide actually made me think a lot. See, this regulation is not in place. Even it curtails the hands of innovation. I mean, we should not be stopping Satya and his team. That's not correct. We are committing a sin. So regulation is very important. There is no doubt about it. And today the Economic Times, I was reading, in India the cryptocurrency ban, statement made by RBI is questioned by everybody because it's too late now to ban. So innovation, it has to happen, and the data consumption, the pattern of data consumption, if we don't bring some kind of life to it, meaningful, usable, when multi-agencies are using, it is going to be too late even there as well. Okay, there are billions of devices are already connected and going on getting connected. So we will get lost. That's all. So regulatory, or it can be a public-private participation, has to happen to make sure that there is something is in place for everyone. Otherwise, we will just lost.
Yes, indeed. I think the whole effort would be lost. So
correct.
So I have another question for I think more to James and Sandesh, because I think James also pointed out that the fact that we are, of course, like there's a cost element when we are building a regulatory or regulation. There's definitely a cost element. Okay, so and of course that's where it's also a pitfall. If you do not implement it, enforce it properly, then the whole regulation becomes very expensive. So in that light, so James, how do you see the whole insurance market? Because everything is risk based. So new technologies are a risk, despite whatever can happen. Like Satya sir was mentioning about Agnikul, having new technologies, and they're part of the launch. Okay, so there are a number of innovative things happening. So how do you see the insurance market evolving, given the fact that the risk is definitely there? So is there anything that you would like to respond there?
Yeah, thanks, Sagar.
Insurance is only one example, but maybe there are other things where legal issues are popping up.
Well, let's touch on insurance, because I work with a lot of insurers, and I'm from the UK, where the London insurance aviation market is based, which insures a lot of the global aviation industry. And I've worked in that market in London previously as well. So, I mean, it's interesting from an aviation perspective how to ensure this new technology, because actually there probably needs to be some of that innovation in the insurance industry when it comes to policy wordings which can cover this technology. I was approached by a client in Singapore the other day who's currently doing drone deliveries from shore to ship. And his question to me was, how do I ensure my drone and its payload, and what do I need to do to approach insurers? Is there a specific product I can buy? So we reached out to someone that I know within the International Union of Aviation Insurers and explained the situation to them. He then went to a number of companies in London to ask them how they would insure this technology. They didn't know. They didn't have an answer. They weren't sure if it should be attached to the insurance policy of the vessel, of the ship, whether the drone should have its own specific insurance policy, whether the drone should have one policy for the hardware, the drone itself, and a separate policy for the cargo that the drone would be carrying, cargo insurance only. So there is a lot of questions that need to be answered in the insurance industry. But insurers are a really important stakeholder. So if you're developing a technology, don't leave the insurance element till the very end. Once you have a technology which is ready to go to the market, start engaging with people in the insurance industry a year or two before your technology might go live to ensure that they can put a product together for you, which is bespoke and which fits the specific risks of the technology that you're creating. Because technology is often quite often, insurance is quite often an afterthought for entrepreneurs. They build their technology, their engineers, they're very focused on that, and then they focus on some of the commercial and legal elements afterwards. And insurance is really, really important because, as many of you know, especially when it comes to aviation, typically you can't fly an aircraft unless it's insured. And unless you can find an insurance product which fits your technology, it might actually prohibit the technology from getting off the ground. So again, it's all about engaging and engaging early. The same way I would advise companies to engage with their regulators, do it early.
Thank you, James. Sandesh, would you have anything, any other point? Any, like, insurance is one, aspect, but probably any other legal or policy issue that you would like to point?
The cyber insurance is an integral part of the data privacy agreement. As I've given examples of, say, Tesla or Google, whenever they are giving their data to process to the India, so whenever they are giving the cross-border data for processing or for accessing, if the data get breached, as per the GDPR or as per the data privacy laws, there are heavy penalties are involved. If you see the news, the Facebook and Google, they are giving away the $1 million of penalties whenever this kind of breaches are happening. So the cyber insurance, you said very correct point. So cyber insurance is a very key element here. So the data is getting breached knowingly or unknowingly. So when you store the data, so it's your responsibility how the data is getting stored with the regulatory authorities, with the land of the law. If you're storing data in India or if you're storing data in the China, and if you're accessing that data from the Europe, then the China and Europe, both laws have to get abide. So you made a very correct point of cyber insurance. So thanks, Sagar, for that. So thanks for
No, but I also think it, as you said, there should be more consistency cross-border as well, not just in technologies, and also financing mechanisms that should evolve accordingly, and also dispute resolution is another point that should also equally evolve. So there are a number of elements I think legal or policy experts should catch up. So there are, of course, the work in progress as well. I have one last question for all the panelists, just for a reflection, maybe just, like in one line or two lines. For 2022, what do you, it's not a prediction as such, but because the theme of the conference is fall or rise of the transport sector. So I can already tell you that last 2 days, everyone are very optimistic, everyone very upbeat mood, despite whatever we went through. So that already shows how resilient the sector is, and the fact that the passenger and the cargo and the innovation continues, because with COVID, as Satya sir already pointed out, COVID actually triggered, new innovation and technologies to actually leap forward what could have otherwise taken another 5 to 10 years. So I think overall there's a lot of upbeat, but probably there's one or two things which you would like to see specifically in 2022 to happen, so that that upbeat mood continues despite Omicron or whatever that comes through. So Satya sir, first over to you, and then Bhaskar sir, Sandesh, and then James.
Yeah. So I'm going to draw upon Bill Gates' saying that people tend to over-predict what happens in 2 years and under-predict what happens in 10 years. So it is actually very hard to tell what exactly will happen within 1 year at the kind of impact level that I look for. So I'm usually a long-term guy. So I think if I have to actually restrict myself to about 2022, I would definitely expect that there will be a significant improved level of sales of electric vehicles, particularly the light commercial vehicle category. I think that march is definitely on. We will probably see increasingly electric vehicles becoming comparable in prices to IC engine vehicles through this upcoming year. That's what I really also am hoping for. That should be for sure. We're always looking for more improvements in battery technologies. This again could be of the lithium ion variety, as well as there is a lot of rapid strides that are happening on the sidelines in non-lithium ion chemistries, which we need to be watching out for. My expectation is it should be a matter of about 2 to 3 years when we give birth to non-lithium based batteries, but 2 to 3 years could actually be even within 1 year. So these are a couple of things that I would say. Air taxis are probably about 2-3 years away. Maybe you will get maybe certifications happen in 2022 or maximum maybe 2023. You will begin to see that. But I think in terms of commercial services, it could be even 2024 is the generally prevalent notion. Yeah, I think we can probably expect rocket launches to happen with 3D printed rockets. That's something that I'm looking forward to in 2022. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Oscar,
Yeah,
sir,
I
over to
have
you.
only 2 points. I have only 2 points I wanted to share. One is, travel industry always questioned on the personal hygiene. Okay, we need to be very clear and candid on how we are going to deal and how the transportation industry is going to communicate the personal hygiene is not tampered or disturbed due to travel. That one confidence level that we need to bring. Of course, the second one is obviously, we have to get onto the data management because Sandesh given a lot of inputs. The way we are seeing, if we don't have a proper regulation at least, then I think the government should step in and the private parties should step in to regulate that at least so that we can help, Satya kind of leaders to innovate further, go fast. That's all.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sandesh, over
Yeah,
to
so
you.
what I can see the major shift, the way all e-commerce companies or the operating system companies has converted their business into the data center business. Why? Just to come and ride and sit on the data. As you know, the data is the new oil, we say. They want to shift the superpower from the Gulf or from the oil making or the oil manufacturing industries to the non-oil manufacturing industries. That's the reason the battery making cars or the transportation system which is running on non gasoline based vehicles like non diesel or non petrol vehicles. So electric cars is going to be a key. But who is going to make a shift in this electric car? Who are the people who are going to make this revolution? Is of course not going to be a Detroit is of course not going to be an industry who were like kind of automobile hub for the decades. So this new shift is going to get by the IT giants. The way similar way this all the pharma industry has been taken over by IT giants. The IT giants like Google, Apple, or Amazon. These are the people who are going to take over the automobile industry, and they are the people who are going to control this data. And for controlling data, for the layman like us, we need to be more vigilant that where are we selling our data or where are we? I mean, we as an individual are we doesn't go to sell our data, but like we are prone to data. Our data is getting sold. We are using a lot of products like Twitter, Facebook, or even this virtual platform. We think all these platforms are free. These platforms are not free. We are free for this company. I mean, this company are using data or us as a data subject. I mean, we are getting sold indirectly. So that a major shift I'm going to see in 2022 to 2025, and because of like lot of data needs to get generated, so a lot of people should communicate and interact online, and that's the reason this pandemic thing is going to make a big revolution in data transfer and data storage. And this data transfer is not happening only locally. This is happening across the borders. So more and more stringent regulations or stringent law should come. And this law should doesn't work only in silo, only like cyber security law, data privacy law. This law should go very closely with like telecom authority, the Department of Telecom, or the aerospace law, aviation law, or the intellectual property law. So all these interdisciplinary things should happen. So this is what I see. And of course, the one point you have made, the ADR kind of alternate dispute resolution kind of things come. So this kind of I mean, ADR is very not so much promoted in India. We can see there are ADR hubs like Singapore, UK, or in fact even Dubai. So this ADR kind of hub should be created in India because India is already in a race of the IT revolution. So we should make our legal systems also so strong that our with the help of ADR and IT revolutioner, we should we are not far from getting into the race of superpower. So that's my take.
And we have a comment in relation to, yeah, thank you for that, Sandesh. We also have a comment in support of your point that protocols need to be put in place when it comes to security of data. So I think probably that's what you're talking about when we talk about cross-border data. You cannot have that extra jurisdictional kind of a legislation. So
Right.
I think these kind of protocols or some kind of a bilaterals should be put in place.
Exactly.
So yeah. So James, over to you.
There you go.
Final
Yeah.
comments, yes. Mhm.
I'm optimistic about the future of the transportation sector and specifically the aviation sector. We have not a fully clean slate, but a chance for a reset, which has been created by COVID. It's been traumatic for everyone, both on personal and professional level. But I think there is an opportunity now for the industry to take a look at itself and see what can be done better. And as we look at what's ahead of us in the future, the bigger challenge, and COVID has been challenging, but the bigger challenge of climate change, how we can look at implementing the technology that all of the panelists have talked about today to actually tackle that challenge before it gets too much more, too great for us to deal with. So I think I'm optimistic, but COVID was a small challenge. There are bigger ones ahead. And we now need to apply this same kind of entrepreneurial, technology forward thinking to those challenges if the aviation industry and the transportation industry is going to be sustainable and viable in the long run.
Thank you. I think that kind of sums up as well. I think we need to evolve. I mean, we cannot be stuck with COVID and COVID-related issues. I think we need to march forward, and technology definitely, however you put it, whether it's an enabler or not, I think technology is going to be part of our lives, and I think we should work together with the technology and evolve, and hopefully law and regulatory mechanisms also evolve as fast as we can get to. So thank you again to each of you. I know there's so much to talk about. I mean, we could always talk about sustainability or how technology is also helping, but we touched on kind of every point that in this 1 hour or 1.5 hours. But again, thank you to each of you for your input and for being part of the conference. And well, we hope to see you in 2022. Let's say in a physical format as well. And then again, we'll see how what 2022 brings. It's not about the prediction, as some of you pointed out. No, we can never predict, but the idea is at least there are some short, medium, long-term goals that we need to set for ourselves as an industry or as a sector in order to get there. So thank you one and all, and we'll have a good holiday and a very happy new year. And we have one last session, which is the closing session. After this, in like 5 minutes, we'll start. Where we are going to have the managing director of the Cochin Airport in Kerala. They're the first airport in the world, a green airport in the world. Everything is run through solar. So just also to keep that in perspective, like, we talked about technology, digital, but sustainability is also equally catching up, both in boardrooms as well as in of the businesses, but also across. So thank you again to the current panelists. So once again, and we will see each other soon. But for the participants, you can stay on and for another half an hour, and then we are done with the 2-day conference. Thank you, James, again. Thank you, Sandesh.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot. Thanks,
Bye.
James. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Sagar.